Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Sheryl McCumsey, founder of Pesticide-Free Alberta. She has since moved to British Columbia to the Sunshine Coast, where everything is always beautiful and happy. Or is it? We'll find out when we chat with Sheryl. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Sheryl, we're now into forest fire season in BC, and we always wonder, is there a way to keep these things under control naturally?
Well, we know deciduous trees prevent or slow down the spread of a forest fire. It's documented in science, and forest fire fighters know that's where they want to escape to when a fire gets out of control. So having diversity in our forests in the form of deciduous trees is extremely important. And we're still hearing from the Ministry of Environment that what they do is fine. No worries, basically, which is just incredible.
So what has been happening in BC, and why is it so disturbing?
Well, there's a number of things. I mean, some people have probably seen, CBC did a story recently that said that the lack of bees and pollinators, wild bees in particular, are affecting crop yields. And we're talking about quite a reduction of certain crops like blueberries, for example, because we're losing wild bees, not just honeybees. And then they go on to talk about, in the study that they did, how this, how we need to enhance habitat for wild bees. Well, if we're going to talk about habitat, well, spraying our forest, for one thing, is a bad idea. And then secondly, using pesticides that have what we call conditional registrations, they're called, according to the federal audit done of the Pest Management Regulatory Agency. Conditional registrations, meaning these pesticides have been on the market for some up to 20 years without the required science being submitted. But there's quite a bit of science on them now to show how toxic and harmful they are, how they persist, how they not only impact all insect life, but even birds that eat those insects, for example, and so on. And recently, even deer. So it's quite remarkable that we get letters back from these from the Ministry of Environment that people have been sending, saying that it's confirmed that this is not harmful to human health or the environment. Confirmed. How is that? How does that work? Because we have all kinds of concerns with the registration process in the first place with pesticides. But what we're seeing happening in forestry and even on our farms now with the loss of crops, I just wonder at what point do they wake up to these concerns? Like, what is it going to take?
Well, perhaps a class action lawsuit. What's going on, by the way, speaking of class actions, with the lawsuit against Roundup in California?
I haven't followed recently. I just know that the last time I looked, there was a little over $10 billion set aside for future plaintiffs coming up, and Bayer seems to like that. Probably because there's a whole lot more out there than we know. But there was 3 court cases, and in those court cases, it was revealed that Monsanto, who has now been bought out by Bayer, hid evidence of cancer. I mean, it's in the documents for discovery that you can find on these law firms' websites. So What kind of confirmation is that? That really blows me away, that word confirmed. And actually, I think people should take that word to task, confirmed. We've been saying to our government, we do not consent to spraying in our forests surrounding us here, because, first of all, this is public land, and it's not necessary. It's absolutely not necessary. I mean, the reason they do it is because they want to prevent, they use language which is pretty revealing. They talk about crop trees. They don't really say forest. They talk about crop trees. So there's certain kinds of trees they want to grow to harvest down the road, and any kind of competing vegetation they want to remove. So that can be berry bushes and deciduous trees. And they say they use pesticides as a last resort. Well, what does that mean, a last resort? Like, how does somebody determine what a last resort is? There has been historically manual girding of trees and so on to control vegetation that they consider harmful to their crop trees. But the language and the mindset that's revealed in these reports is incredibly disturbing, because it's not based on looking at the whole of the forest. It's all on really basically having a tree plantation in our forest, which doesn't work. Industrial agriculture really doesn't work, because you create problems when you grow massive amounts of one kind of plant. It just doesn't work. You end up having to use more and more pesticides. And anyways, I would like to talk about the registration concerns, because I have a letter from Health Canada that admits that industry provides the studies that's used to register these products. Health Canada doesn't do any studies of its own. So we have a conflict of interest that's actually been studied in itself, that industry providing science is a conflict of interest. But we don't also test the product that's used. So when we talk about glyphosate, we don't use glyphosate on its own. We use Roundup. Roundup has additives in it to make it work. Otherwise, without them, the product doesn't work on its own. Those products that are added in there increase toxicity. So how can you say something, how can you confirm that something isn't harmful when you're not actually testing what you're actually using? It's quite incredible. And another one, these conditional registrations that we had at the time this audit was done, 80 pesticides with conditional registrations. And if you go to the BC and Alberta websites, you'll see they now call these registrations emergency registrations. Emergency registrations, meaning if there's an increase of a certain insect, we can register a pesticide and we'll call it an emergency now instead of a conditional registration. It's outrageous, really.
There's debate, of course. The Russians claim they've got a good COVID-19 vaccine. Other people are saying, whoa, you skipped 2 or 3 or 4 steps on proving that it's going to be safe and effective. It sounds like the pesticide makers are cranking out their version of Russian vaccine.
Well, yes, I know that world-class virologists have stated that there has never been an effective vaccine for a coronavirus. These are people who know what they're talking about, and there's report after report showing that people don't seem to either even have immunity or they don't have lasting immunity. So how is a vaccine even going to work if you don't have lasting immunity? That is a big question. And even on CBC, I heard them, a guy stating that, yeah, fast tracking the testing of a drug, which is what this is a drug, is a concern. So, you know, first of all, I would ask whether we can even develop a vaccine. We might be wanting to think about addressing this disease another way, but yeah, it's not just pesticides that are on the market that aren't assessed properly. There's other things. There's some things that aren't tested at all, that are brought into Canada in the form of, stuff that's added to our cosmetics, for example. The cosmetic industry is pretty shocking when you actually start looking. But, people don't realize either that in general that we're spraying our forests. I mean, a lot of people don't even know that's going on. And when they actually look at these reports and how they're worded and the mindset behind them, I mean, I don't know if the company here even knows what's going on, because they don't actually do the spraying. They hire a company to do it for them. So who's the oversight on this company that's spraying? There's nobody out there watching them. There's one certified user in a crew. So who's going to be watching what's going on back there? Well, I did a FOIP to ask, which is a request for information, freedom of information request to our BC government, to see pesticide abuse reports that have been filed. You can imagine that that's probably rare in the forestry industry. And the Ministry of Environment stated back to us that this is not a public interest. So if we want this information, we have to pay for it, because it's not a public interest. Meanwhile, in Prince George, the petition in Prince George has 120,000 signatures on it. And in our community, within a couple of weeks, we had well over 1,000 signatures in a community of about 13,000 people. How can you say that this is not a public interest? People might not know what's going on, but when they do, they certainly do seem very interested and very concerned. So we're going to the Privacy Commissioner with that, and I'm giving lots of information about how it certainly is a public concern. But another one that we wanted to see was the spray sheets, actual spray sheets of what's actually been applied in forestry. And I've been told that a thorough search was conducted and no records were located, because the pesticide applicator keeps these reports and they don't see them unless an inspector asks to see them in part of an inspection. Well, I'm doing an inspection. I want to see those reports because I live here and I'm told they don't spray very much, and I'm like, well, I want to know that. I don't want somebody just telling me they don't spray very much. I want to see it for myself with my own eyes. I'm kind of incredulous that we're told there's confirmation from the Ministry of Environment that none of this is harmful to human health. Well, maybe the Ministry of Environment should be looking at a lawsuit, because I'm pretty sure there's quite a few people out there who would take issue with that comment. I know there's several class action suits now initiated in Canada in regards to glyphosate. That's just one pesticide. We've got 7,000 pesticide products registered in Canada, and some of them have not been reevaluated since they were registered. Some of them have been on the market for many, many years. Chlorpyrifos is one that comes to mind. It was registered in 1969, and I'm still not sure it has been completely reassessed. Pretty sure that's still ongoing right now.
We'll have more with Sheryl McCumsey right after this.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlin, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration, with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Value from success. Growth in discovery. Golden Arrow Resources is a well-funded gold-copper exploration company with proven management and prospective properties in Chile, Argentina, and Paraguay. Golden Arrow trades on the Toronto Venture Exchange, symbol GRG, on Frankfurt, symbol G6A, and the OTCQB, symbol GARWF. For more information, visit us at goldenarrowresources.com or call Sean at 778-686-0135.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Sheryl McCumsey. Sheryl, how deep does this concern go where governments either don't comply with freedom of information requests or you end up with a bunch of pieces of paper that are all blacked out?
Well, I've heard people saying that's an issue here. Lack of transparency is certainly an issue here, and it looks like that's probably true. And yeah, what would they be blacking out? Well, the only kind of things you should really be blacking out is somebody's name. Otherwise, what they're using, where they're using, when they're using it, well, that should be published. We shouldn't even have to ask for that. Like, some countries do that, provide information like that publicly because it shouldn't be a secret. We're kind of told that these studies that are done, that nobody can actually just ask to see. You have to go to Ottawa, sign an affidavit. You're not allowed to make copies of anything. You're allowed to take a pencil and a piece of paper in the library with me to look at whatever's there. And if you see an issue with it, you can't publish about it because you don't have any copies to refer to. So where is the oversight of all of this? I mean, there's other registration concerns that are quite glaring, like one being combinations of pesticides. We do not test combinations of pesticides before we put them on the market. Lawn Chemical has 3 different herbicides. They're not tested together to see what that synergistic impact is. But when you have new genetically engineered crops going in the market that are designed to be sprayed with 5 herbicides, you got to give your head a shake and say, where does this end? It's obviously not working, and there are other ways of doing things. And in our forests, we could stop spraying. Quebec stopped spraying about 20 years ago now. So the mindset behind doing this is just really twisted. It's not looking at the whole. Forests are not considered forests. They're considered tree plantations.
Well, if you have, of course, a tree plantation isn't going to have a proper balance of birds and animals and fungi. You can say it 3 different ways, a fun word. Mm-hmm. How is that healthy for the environment? Considering, again, if you want to call it a plantation, you think of a few acres, but these things cover square kilometers, not hectares.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, for one thing, you have soil instability. You have damage to the soil. You have an increase of disease and insect infestations because you lack diversity in your forest. You have a reduction of a number of species if you don't have a place for a bird to nest or food for animals to eat. And then there's a cycle of things. I mean, there's a cycle between the forest and the salmon, for example, and the bears. So all of these things together collectively create, healthy soil and a healthy forest floor for all of the trees, including the ones that you want to harvest. So the industry really, in its myopic view, basically shoots itself in the foot. Maybe not right away, but in the end it does, because what you're doing is it's like you're not looking after things the way you should be looking after them in order to have a viable forest in the future. And if you've created conditions where insects and disease and forest fires are more of a threat, well, today it's more and more important. I mean, if we have reports that are coming out showing that wild bees are definitely having a big impact on our crops, the loss of them, Well, we're talking about economy. We're not just talking about, someone who's green, who likes bees and butterflies. We're talking about the reality of having food. And in the U.S. right now, if anybody's noticed, we've had recalls of onions and lemons and limes, big time down there, because of whatever contaminant happened on these big farms, because we're talking about big farms. So we have a threat to food security because we are not focusing on local, small, organic food producers anywhere near as much as we should be. So what you end up with is a problem with trying to get food even transported. I mean, most of our food is coming from places like California, and, they've got COVID going on, so their workers, actually in California, a report came out recently that said that most of the workers were infected with this. So who's going to harvest this? We have threat to fires, we have threat to earthquakes, we have threat to disease and insects because of our monocultures. When are we going to learn? I really shake my head because when I get a letter from the Ministry of Environment that says confirmation that there's no harm to human health and environment, I'm like, what planet is he living on? Where is he learning this? What has he read that tells him that's true? Because I doubt it. I doubt it a whole lot, and I bet they cannot prove what they say. They just say these things to us because they believe them, I suppose, but where is the information? And when the public keeps asking for it and demanding that there be better answers, where do we think this is going to end? It's not going to end well. So it's going to continue to decline and cost everyone. We're going to all be paying more for our food because we don't want to see this. It's just too disturbing.
We'll have more with Sheryl McCumsey right after this.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Sheryl McCumsey. Sheryl, there's disturbing reports that perhaps New Zealand, after going over 100 days without any COVID cases, got a handful. They think it might have come in on frozen imported food, and now they're seeing other cases. And it was Canadian studies that prove, and we know through the cold and flu season, the cold does not kill viruses. Perhaps people who were infected handled this frozen food. So is that another concern about why you might want to buy locally from your local farmer's organic market?
Well, I mean, we could try to use COVID as an example, but like what I was using was, the problem was listeria, which is definitely going to hang around a whole lot longer than maybe a viral organism would. So it really doesn't matter. There's just always going to be a risk of all of these different kinds as long as we keep thinking that importing mass quantities of food from other places when we've got all this turmoil going on. I mean, COVID is just a thing to make us think about the weaknesses in the system. And if we're not thinking about it now, I don't think we ever will. It's just pointing out the weaknesses in the system. So whether COVID hangs around or it doesn't hang around, that's not the issue. If you have a lot of sick workers in a country that you're depending to get your food from, you have a serious problem. And so what you do where you live isn't going to matter if you're importing mass quantities of food. And we didn't used to do that. We used to produce most of our own food. And the less movement around you have, the better. I mean, it's going to be fresher. It's going to be probably nutritionally better because you're not transporting it long distances. And of course, the soil is always going to be really important. I've been reading some different books, and this one guy is talking about how organic is not all the whole picture that's important. Of course it's not, because if you're not looking after your soil, you're not going to have the nutritional benefit from that food that you need. And we're seeing a lot of deficiencies happening in North America. Some are becoming extremely common, and they're creating serious health issues that seem to go unnoticed. One is magnesium, for example. A lot of people have magnesium deficiencies, and they probably don't address it in a meaningful way. They could end up with depression because it affects the brain. There was a study that came out that showed magnesium supplements work better than antidepressants. Well, again, the pharmaceutical industry ain't going to like that one very much. But, so it's like, are we really looking at having good health? We have to look at good food, because it's what we put into our bodies every day. It's what nourishes our bodies every day. And if we have things in our food that are going to inhibit proper absorption, like glyphosate, chelates, magnesium, zinc, iron, etc., all of these necessary elements that we need in our body, if it holds on to these minerals in the plant and in your gut, it's going to have a chronic impact on your health, whether you're aware of it or not. There's certainly science in all these things, but it's complicated to look at the thing as a whole. But when you only want to look at one thing, and that's just the active ingredient, not the whole product, for example, you're missing a whole bunch of information about how this is really going to impact people and the environment. You cannot say that a cigarette, for example, only has nicotine in it. I mean, we know there's all kinds of things in cigarettes that are harmful besides nicotine. So, yeah, what are we doing here? And where are we going? I mean, we have a lot of people with gut issues in Canada. We have people that immigrate to Canada that develop gut issues. We have people with cancer, with deficiencies. We're not very healthy. So why is that? Are we looking at the why, or are we only going to address things after they happen?
Sheryl, how can people get more information about what to do if they're concerned about all this contamination in our food, water, and soil?
Well, there's several sources. I mean, if you're concerned about forestry spraying, Stop the Spray BC has a good website that has good information on forestry spraying in BC. And there's other provinces that have web pages like New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, for example. If you're concerned about your food, the Environmental Working Group does do a little bit on, they call it the dirty dozen, the food that has the highest residues of pesticides. Although I feel like they miss a lot of things. They don't really, go over grains, or I think they have some holes in their information. And so there's a variety of places. I mean, there's certain organizations that are trying to address the problems with pesticides in Canada. One of them is Safe Food Matters, and then there's EcoJustice, Equiterre, David Suzuki Foundation, the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, and so on. I mean, it's sort of all over the place. There isn't really one place that could give you all of that information. Certainly organic pages will give you some information about really what they do, what they avoid in farms that are certified organic. And going directly to your farmer and ask them exactly what they do. Most farmers are actually pretty good about telling you what they do. A lot of them will even tell you, that they are using pesticides. Most of them are not trying to hide that, but trying to get good local food is one of the best things we can do locally to support that. Otherwise, I would say I would like to see the Minister of Environment's phone literally ring right off the wall, because people should be outraged that they're being told that there's confirmation this is not harmful to human health and the environment. There's quite a lot of evidence that says something else, and I'd like to see him prove it. Like, prove it to us with evidence in studies that shows that Roundup, not glyphosate, Roundup is safe for us at the quantities we're being exposed to in our daily food and water. And show us that it's not in our water. It is in our water. So I hope people will take action, because the only way this ship is going to turn around is if every single one of us changes how we eat and changes how we are pacified by these words which have literally no meaning.
Sheryl, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks so much.
My guest has been Sheryl McCumsey, founder of Pesticide Free Alberta. And now she has moved to the Sunshine Coast of British Columbia, where she carries on her campaign to try to give us clean food, air, water, soil, and forests, not monoculture plantations. If you have any questions for Sheryl or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at Talk Digital Net. You can also find us on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.